Welcome back. Today we are discussing 1 Nephi chapter 5 verse 1. And it came to pass after we had come down into the wilderness unto our father, behold, he was filled with joy, and also my mother Soraya was exceedingly glad, for she truly had mourned because of this. Really all I did was I needed an excuse to talk about Sariah and that name, so I jumped ahead to the next time Soraya was mentioned. We may revisit this verse, but after this we'll come back to going in order if you're following along in real time. So a lot of criticism has been shared about the name Sariah, especially early on in the circulation of the Book of Mormon. Many people pointed out that the names in the Book of Mormon were either too common or were not authentic to ancient Israel or Egypt or Hebrew, or there was no record of these names being used in Hebrew. One of the criticisms was of Sariah, spelled S-R-Y-H in Hebrew, and it was mentioned 19 times in the Hebrew Old Testament in reference to 11 different males. So it was a very common name, and critics of the Book of Mormon pointed to the idea that Joseph Smith obviously just took this name from the Bible but wasn't even smart enough to get the right gender when he used the name Sariah in the Book of Mormon. So it was known strictly as a male name all the way through the 1800s. Well after Joseph Smith had passed. The Hebrew translation of Sariah would be Jehovah is Prince, and that'll be important as we close up our study at the end. So, vindication, as it usually does with the Book of Mormon, comes in time. So, in the early 1900s, a stack of papyrus was discovered in the island of Elephantine, just off the coast of Egypt. Here in this papyrus, it was written in Aramaic. The gray part that you see in this picture is the part that was recovered and restored. Everything in white was filled in by archaeologists and historians using context and their best guesses, really. So here we see Soraya, Barat, Hoshea, Bar Harman, and the text means Soraya, daughter of Hoshea, son of Harman. This dates back to 419 BC. And so what we're looking for in this document is proof that Sariah was a female name used. And so here, if the additions are correct, we have proof that Sariah was a daughter of someone, meaning that Sariah was a female name used in ancient antiquity. Like I said, this dates to 419 BC, so about 200 years after Nephi and Lehi had left Jerusalem. Jeffrey R. Chadwick didn't make this connection until 1993, so we had about 90 years of this document being in circulation until finally the connection was made by Jeffrey R. Chadwick to show proof that Sariah was a female name. Some were reluctant to accept this, though. One among those was Paul Y. Hoskisson, a church historian and doctrinal expert, just because of the missing fragments. So what we're looking for when we're looking for the term Sariah, daughter of, is Sariah Barat. So Barat is daughter of, Bar, son of, Barat is daughter of. Sariah would be the name that would be spelled using Sin Resh Yod He, so S-R-Y-H. Now remember, in ancient Jewish languages, they didn't use vowels, so Sariah would just be the S-R, Y, and H, and that Y-H would make that I-A-H sound that we use. You can see from the red here, we have the Sin is at first going right to left, as the Hebrews wrote. We have the Sin is the first letter, and we have it completely there. We know that's Sin. Then we see Resh is in full form, and then we see the Yod in full form, and then he had to add the He, or the H, as we would transcribe it, and then we have the daughter of, and we just have the final At. So we don't have the Bar, but we know that this is a list of lineage, because following that it says Hoshea is a son of a bar of Harman. So we can infer that he's either saying this missing word is either son or daughter, and we have the end of the word daughter, the at, which is the most important part, because that's what differentiates it from being a son. So you can see the context here clearly implies that this is what this is. This is agreed by church scholars as well as ancient Hebrew non-members of the church, that this is what this says. Paul I. Hoskisson understandably was reluctant because we don't have a full clear picture of it. We just have fragments that we've put together, and he was still looking for more evidence that Sariah could be used as a female name, and we have it now. So an Osteocon was found. An Osteocon is a clay shard, a piece of pottery that was used anciently for writing, and they would break, but the nice thing about it is, even though they would break, the transcriptions would stay for a long time, so we can discover a lot of these words, and we don't have much from this clay shard, but we do have is the term Soraya Barat. So right here in full text here, we have it without anything missing. We see that we have now a second witness that inference that was made about the previous papyrus was probably correct, and we have a second piece of evidence that Sariah was used in antiquity as an ancient female name. This shard dates between 400 and 450 BC from Elephantine. Whether it was talking about the same Sariah or a different Sariah, we don't know. But we do know that Sariah was a female that lived on Elephantine between 400 and 500 BC. This is obviously very interesting. It provides proof and yet another situation in which somebody's criticism of the Book of Mormon turns out to be a proof for its authenticity. There's no way anyone in 1800 frontier America would have known to use Sariah, especially in the form of a female. But it gets even more interesting when we learn about Elephantine. Elephantine was an island off the coast of Egypt. The island was inhabited by a Jewish fundamentalist group. The Jewish temple is found on the island, dating back almost as far as 600 BC, about the same time that Nephi and Lehi left Jerusalem. It was inhabited by Jewish mercenaries around 650 BC. That's when they began to inhabit the island. The island was inhabited by these people. They were fundamentalist Jews who didn't like what was going on with the Jewish church in the northern kingdom and fled to find refuge. And one of the places they found refuge was here in Elephantine, where they were hired as mercenaries for Egypt, who had just driven out the Assyrians. They basically became part of the Egyptian army to drive out the wicked and evil Assyrians, and in return they were given safety, protection, and wages. It's now known that these people did come from the northern kingdom of Israel around 650 to 700 BC. It's also believed that they would have traveled through the southern kingdom, through Jerusalem, on their way to Elephantine, and it's believed that many of those people in that group stayed behind in Jerusalem and established a home there before the rest of the group went on to Elephantine. It is possible that Lehi or Lehi's father or grandfather was part of this group that left the northern kingdom, the land of their inheritance, stopped in Jerusalem, and then that group continued on to Elephantine without Lehi and Soraya. But the name Soraya would have come from people that dated back to the exact same place during the exact same time in history. So if this wasn't a common name in Jerusalem for a woman, it was in the northern kingdom, where both Soraya, the wife of Lehi, and Soraya of Elephantine, and maybe a second Soraya of Elephantine, all originated from the same spot. This wasn't obviously known until the late 1900s, way after the Book of Mormon was written, and they trace back to the same group of people, almost the same neighborhood that we can track down in the northern kingdom of Israel. It even gets more interesting as we read some of the doctrine that made this fundamentalist Hebrew group kind of ostracize Jews in Jerusalem, kind of disown them. One of the doctrines that they differed in from the mainstream Jews is their belief in a heavenly mother and a heavenly father, and their understanding of the Godhead. And this was something that had already begun to change, obviously, with the Jews at this time, and it was taught very clearly and very distinctively by the group of Elephantine, of a heavenly mother and a heavenly father. And now we circle back to the meaning of Sariah being Jehovah is Prince, or Christ is Prince, subservient to a king, Elohim. This all comes full circle, and It's an amazing evidence of the authenticity and the spirituality, the miracle that is the Book of Mormon. So what are the chances of Joseph Smith, the frontier farm boy at age 23, figuring this out, or even guessing this? It really couldn't have been figured out at the time unless he had gone and found the clay pottery himself and not told anybody about it. But the chances of guessing this unknown name correctly would be 1 out of 783,077,373, or a 0.0000001% chance of guessing this name correctly, in my mind, proving the authenticity of the Book of Mormon.